China-United States relations, more often known as U.S.-Chinese relations, Chinese-U.S. relations, or Sino-American relations, refer to international relations between the United States of America and the People's Republic of China. The partnership between China and the United States, where each nation regards each other as a potential adversary as well as a strategic partner, has been described by world leaders and academics as the world's most important bilateral relationship of the century. As of 2014, the United States has the world's largest economy and China the second largest. The International Monetary Fund estimates that China's economy has overtaken that of United States in terms of GDP in 2014, but the United States' economy will remain larger than China's in nominal GDP until the end of the 2010s. China-United States relations have generally been stable with some periods of open conflict, most notably during the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Currently, China and the United States have mutual political, economic, and security interests, including, but not limited to, the prevention of terrorism and the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Although there are unresolved concerns relating to the role of democracy in government in China and human rights in both respective countries, China remains the largest foreign creditor of the United States, holding about 10% of the U.S. national debt. The two countries remain in dispute over territorial issues in the South China Sea. At the annual Strategic and Economic Dialogue in 2014, both countries confirmed that they wanted to improve the relationship. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry stated that the United States did not seek to contain China, while Chinese paramount leader Xi Jinping stated that a confrontation between the two countries would be a disaster. Public opinion between both countries tends to fluctuate around 40 to 50%. As of 2015, China's public opinion of the U.S. is at 44%, while the United States' public opinion of China is significantly lower at 38%. The highest recorded favorable opinion of the United States was at 58% and the lowest at 38%, while the highest recorded favorable opinion of China was at 52% and the lowest at 35%. Country comparison. Leaders of the United States and the People's Republic of China. The Qing dynasty and the United States. Formal diplomatic relations between the United States and the Chinese Empire began about June 16, 1844 as the countries engaged in the negotiations which led to the Treaty of Guangxia. From 1784 consuls were sent to Guangzhou, the treaty port open to traders from the United States. According to a Chinese diplomat who negotiated with the United States in 1844, old China trade coins, ginseng, and furs, and more prominently tea, cotton, silk, lacquer, porcelain, and furniture were once traded as commodities between the two countries. Opium Wars. After the Treaty of Nanking at the end of the First Opium War in 1842, many Chinese ports were forced to open to foreign trade, which threatened American trade in the region. President John Tyler, however, secured the 1844 Treaty of Guangxia, which gave Americans the right of extraterritoriality, and placed American trade on par with British trade. This treaty effectively ended the era of the old China trade, giving to the rise of the United States as an emergent power. After China's defeat in the Second Opium War, the then Emperor of China, Zhanfeng, fled Beijing. His brother Yixin, the Prince Gong, ratified the Treaty of Shenzhen in the Convention of Peking on October 18, 1860. This treaty stipulated, among other terms, that along with Britain, France, and Russia, the United States would have the right to station administrative offices in Beijing. which was closed prior to the war. Taiwan's Americans advocated for the annexation of Taiwan from China. Aboriginals on Taiwan often attacked and massacred shipwrecked Western sailors. In 1867, during the Rover incident, Taiwanese Aborigines attacked shipwrecked American sailors, killing the entire crew. They subsequently skirmished against and defeated a retaliatory expedition by the American military and killed another American during the battle. The Burlingame Treaty and the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1868. The Qing government appointed Anson Burlingame as their emissary to the United States. Burlingame toured the country to build support for equitable treatment for China and for Chinese immigrants. The 1868 Burlingame Treaty embodied these principles. In 1871, the Chinese Educational Mission brought the first of two groups of 120 Chinese boys to study in the United States. They were led by Yung Wing, the first Chinese man to graduate from an American university. During the California Gold Rush and the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, large numbers of Chinese emigrated to the U.S., spurring animosity from American citizens. After being forcibly driven from the mines, most Chinese settled in Chinatowns in cities such as San Francisco, taking up low-end wage labor, such as restaurant and cleaning work. With the post-Civil War economy in decline by the 1870s, anti-Chinese animosity became politicized by labor leader Dennis Kearney and his party, as well as by the California Governor John Bigler. Both blamed Chinese coolies for depressed wage levels. In the first significant restriction on free immigration in U.S. history, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act on May 6, 1882, following revisions made in 1880 to the Burlingame Treaty. Those revisions allowed the United States to suspend immigration, and Congress acted quickly to implement the suspension of Chinese immigration and exclude Chinese skilled and unskilled laborers from entering the country for 10 years, under penalty of imprisonment and deportation. The ban was renewed a number of times, lasting for over 60 years. Searching for the China market, the American China Development Company, founded in 1895 by J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie, sought to provide the American capital and management that would generate a rapid industrialization of China. It started building the Hankow-Canton Railroad to link central and southern China. It only managed to finish 30 miles of line. Americans soon grew disillusioned, and sold out to a rival Belgian syndicate. On the whole, the American dream of getting rich by investing in China or selling to hundreds of millions of Chinese was almost always a failure. Standard Oil did succeed in selling kerosene to the China market, but few others made a profit. The Boxer Rebellion in 1899, a movement of Chinese nationalists calling themselves the Society of Right and Harmonious Fists, started a violent revolt in China, referred to by Westerners as the Boxer Rebellion, against foreign influence in trade, politics, religion, and technology. The campaigns took place from November 1899 to September 7, 1901, during the final years of Manchu rule in China under the Qing dynasty. The uprising began as an anti-foreign, anti-imperialist, peasant-based movement in northern China, in response to foreign Westerners seizing land from locals, concession grabbing, and granting immunity to criminals who converted to Catholicism. The insurgents attacked foreigners who were building railroads and violating feng shui, and Christians who were held responsible for the foreign domination of China. In June 1900, the Boxers entered Peking and ransacked the area around the foreign legations. On June 21, in response to the Western attack on the Chinese Dagu forts, Empress Dowager Cixi declared war against all Western powers. officers, diplomats, foreign civilians, soldiers, and Chinese Christians were besieged during the siege of the international legations for 55 days. A coalition called the Eight-Nation Alliance, comprising Austria-Hungary, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, Britain and the United States, rushed 20,000 troops to the rescue. The multinational forces were initially defeated by a Chinese Muslim army at the Battle of Langfang, but the second attempt in the ghastly expedition was successful due to internal rivalries among the Chinese forces. The Chinese government was forced to indemnify the victims and make many additional concessions. Subsequent reforms implemented after the rebellion contributed to the end of the Qing dynasty and the establishment of the modern Chinese Republic. The United States played a secondary but significant role in suppressing the Boxer Rebellion, largely due to the presence of U.S. ships and troops deployed in the Philippines since the American conquest of the Spanish-American and Philippine-American War. Within the United States Armed Forces, the suppression of the Boxer Rebellion was known as the China Relief Expedition. The Chinese paid indemnities to each of the powers. The U.S. used its $11 million share to promote cultural and educational exchanges and help China modernize. A number of schools were established in China, such as Tsinghua College in Peking. Open-door policy. In the late 19th century, the major world powers began carving out spheres of influence for themselves in China, which was then under the Qing dynasty. The United States, not having such influence, wanted this practice to end. In 1899, U.S. Secretary of State John Hay sent diplomatic letters to these nations, asking them to guarantee the territorial and administrative integrity of China and to not interfere with the free use of treaty ports within their respective spheres of influence. The major powers evaded commitment, saying they could not agree to anything until the other powers had consented first. Hay took this as acceptance of his proposal, which came to be known as the open-door policy. While respected internationally, the open-door policy was ignored by Russia and Japan when they encroached in Manchuria. The U.S. protested Russia's actions. Japan and Russia fought the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, in which the U.S. mediated a peace. Japan also presented a further challenge to the policy with its 21 demands in 1915 made on the then Republic of China. Japan also made secret treaties with the Allies promising Japan the German territories in China. In 1931, Japan invaded and occupied Manchuria. The United States, along with other countries, condemned the action, leading to U.S. support for China in its war with Japan after 1937. The Republic of China and the United States. First few decades. After the Xinhai Revolution in 1911, the United States government recognized the Republic of China government as the sole and legitimate government of China despite a number of governments ruling various parts of China. China was reunified by a single government, ROC, led by the Kuomintang in 1928. The first winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature for writing about China was an American, born in the United States but raised in China, Pearl S. Buck, whose 1938 Nobel lecture was titled The Chinese Novel. World War II. The outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937 saw aid flow into the Republic of China. For the United States under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a series of neutrality acts had been passed in the U.S. with the support of isolationists who forbade American aid to countries at war, because the Second Sino-Japanese War was undeclared. However, Roosevelt denied that a state of war existed in China and proceeded to send aid to Chiang. American public sympathy for the Chinese was aroused by reports from missionaries, novelists such as Pearl S. Buck, and Time magazine of Japanese brutality in China, including reports surrounding the Nanking Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking. Japanese-American relations were further soured by the Uspane incident during the bombing of Nanjing, in which a gunboat of the U.S. Navy was accidentally sunk by Japanese aircraft. Roosevelt demanded an apology and compensation from the Japanese, which was received, but relations between the two countries continued to deteriorate. American public opinion overwhelmingly favored China and denounced Japan. The United States formally declared war on Japan in December 1941 following the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The Roosevelt administration gave massive amounts of aid to Chiang's beleaguered government, now headquartered in Chongqing. Madam Chiang Kai-shek, who had been educated in the United States, addressed the U.S. Congress and toured the country to rally support for China. Congress amended the Chinese Exclusion Act, and Roosevelt moved to end the unequal treaties by establishing the Treaty for Relinquishment of Extraterritorial Rights in China. However, the perception that Chiang's government was unable to effectively resist the Japanese of that he preferred to focus more on defeating the communists grew. China hands such as Joseph Vinegar Joe Stilwell, who spoke fluent Mandarin Chinese, argued that it was in American interest to establish communication with the communists to prepare for a land-based counteroffensive invasion of Japan. The Dixie Mission, which began in 1943, was the first official American contact with the communists. Other Americans, such as Claire Lee Chennault, argued for air power and supported Chiang's position. In 1944, successfully demanded that Stilwell be recalled. General Albert Cody Wedemeyer replaced Stilwell, and Patrick J. Hurley became ambassador. Civil War in mainland China. After World War II ended in 1945, the hostility between the Republic of China and the Communist Party of China exploded into open civil war. The KMT lost effective control of mainland China in the Chinese Civil War in 1949. In the China White Paper in August 1949 drafted by the U.S. State Department that the United States was announcing the hands-off policy to the ROC in Taiwan to the upcoming military attacks from the People's Liberation Army. General Douglas MacArthur directed the military forces under Chiang Kai-shek to go to the island of Taiwan to accept the surrender of Japanese troops, thus beginning the military occupation of Taiwan. American General George Marshall tried to broker a truce between the Republic of China and the Communist Party of China in 1946, but it quickly lost momentum. The nationalist cause declined until 1949, when the Communists emerged victorious and drove the nationalists from the Chinese mainland onto Taiwan and other islands. Mao Zedong established the People's Republic of China in mainland China, while Taiwan and other islands are still retained under the Republic of China rule to this day. Cold War relations. After the Korean War broke out, the Truman administration resumed economic and military aid to the ROC and neutralized Taiwan Strait by United States 7th Fleet to stop a communist invasion of Formosa, until the U.S. formally recognized China in 1979. Washington provided ROC with financial grants based on the Foreign Assistance Act, Mutual Security Act, and Act for International Development enacted by the U.S. Congress. A separate Sino-American Mutual Defense Treaty was signed between the two governments of U.S. and ROC in 1954 and lasted until 1979. The U.S. State Department's official position in 1959 was that the provisional capital of the Republic of China has been at Taipei, Taiwan since December 1949, that the government of the Republic of China exercises authority over the island, that the sovereignty of Formosa has not been transferred to China, and that Formosa is not a part of China as a country, at least not as yet, and not until and unless appropriate treaties are hereafter entered into. Formosa may be said to be a territory or an area occupied and administered by the government of the Republic of China, but is not officially recognized as being a part of the Republic of China. Termination of diplomatic relations. On January 1, 1979, the United States changed its diplomatic recognition of China from Taipei to Beijing. In the US-PRC joint communiqué that announced the change, the United States recognized the People's Republic of China as the government of China. The joint communiqué also stated that within this context, the people of the United States will maintain cultural, commercial, and other unofficial relations with the people on Taiwan. Since then, the ROC has often been referred to as Taiwan, to avoid confusion, although the PRC government claims Taiwan as a province of China. Meanwhile, the U.S. negotiated with Taiwan on what the change meant. Trade continued and the U.S. provided military security.